Joining me in the studio today are Maria Caulfield, who's a Conservative MP for Lewes and her party's Vice Chair for Women. Karen Constantine is a Labour County Councillor in Kent. And CELINE Thomas joins us from the Women's Equality Party. Welcome to all of you. Now first, we're going to talk about the gender pay gap. By April the 4th, all companies and public bodies with more than 250 employees must publish the difference between the average earnings of the men and women who work for them. Already, it's emerged that one Kent council has the largest pay gap of all local authorities in the country. At Tunbridge and Malling, it's 33.6%. Well, that compares with Shepway District Council, where on average men are paid nearly 5% more than women, and Medway, where men get just over 8% more than women. But at Brighton and Hove City Council, women get paid 6% more than men. Well, I'll start with you, Maria Caulfield. 50 years after equal pay was introduced, this does seem to be a stubborn problem, doesn't it? And I know the government says it wants to eliminate the pay gap within a generation. Is it time to introduce penalties to organisations, companies which can't close the gap?
Well, the first thing the government's done is to bring in this legislation so that from April, companies that employ 250 employees or more have to disclose what their pay figures are. And I think shining a light on who is performing well and who isn't, I think will nudge people in the right direction. But you're right. I think if that doesn't do the trick and people aren't shamed into addressing this problem, then I think there will be a push for legislation. I mean, I'm pleased that the Conservative Party, for example, is paying its female employees on average 12% more than men. So I'm pleased about that.
Not the case with women MPs, though. There's
no,
a Parliament's disparity.
Parliament's in a very different situation, and we need to get more women into Parliament to start with. We really want to work towards a 50-50 representation. But I think the start from April of companies having to disclose what their pay figures are, I think is the first step in that direction.
And if that doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean,
fines, that's what the Labour Party would like to introduce.
Absolutely, and we did a report in the Women Inequality Select Committee when I served on it, and it isn't just about pay, it's not just about equal pay, it is about the gender pay gap. And one of the key reasons we found was the lack of flexibility in work for women once they've reached the age where they're having children and taking time off. And very often when women want to return to the workplace, they either have to take a lower paid job or go part-time. That's not flexible working, that's working part-time. It's really a culture shift that needs to happen. So pay is one element of that, but it's part of a whole bigger picture.
There you are, Karen. Listen to what the Conservatives are doing. Yeah. Fines alone won't work, will they?
But I think what we've got here is we've got this very stubborn pay gap that it's not going to be resolved in the next 60 years. So that means anybody watching this programme with a daughter or a granddaughter, they're basically passing on the pay gap to those, individuals. Pay for women is obviously vital. If they get paid less than men, then that means there's less money going into into the family income, and most of the money that women earn gets spent on children. So that boosts, that's a boost against poverty, and there's a lot of families living in poverty in Thanet, where I am.
To be fair to the government,
but we have had
they
this
are
suggestion,
tackling it, aren't they? And this publication,
yeah.
I know that was legislation actually introduced by the Labour government, but this is beginning to happen. I mean, never has this been a better time, surely, to be a woman demanding equal pay.
But let's speed it up. Let's actually look at some of the dodges that currently go on. So if you've got a partner in a firm, they can be paid less, and that can be hidden from this audit. If you've got, you can set people up as companies, so that's another way of avoiding the transparency issue. People still don't talk about their pay at work. I think it would be very good if actually they declared their pay, and I think fundamentally and principally we need to introduce that legislation right across the piece, so all organisations have to declare a pay. And also I would ask this government to support union reps, because union reps go into the workplace and help employers to develop strategies to identify the pay gap and to solve it. But if that doesn't work, let's find the companies.
Okay, and Maria, as Karen just alluded to, actually a lot of public sector organisations like councils have a smaller pay gap than private organisations. I mean, HSBC, it's got a huge gap, something like 60%, so it doesn't make the local authorities look so bad. They have union representation, their staff.
Yeah, and when you look at the figures are really stark, because below the age of 40, actually the pay gap is quite narrow between men and women. Once you hit 40, and actually once you hit 50, the gap is on average 26-27%. So it is when women start to have a family and start to withdraw from the workforce, when they try and get back engaged, they are forced, because there isn't flexible working or problems with childcare, they are forced to go into part-time or lower paid work. So it's you can kind of track where the problems are starting.
Graduation, if you're a graduate. Let's bring in CELINE from the Women's Equality Party. We've heard about fines, we've talked about using a stick rather than carrot approach. Would you be supportive of that?
I think you're right. We've waited far, far too long, and we can't wait any longer. My worry is that this is a bit of a decoy. So this legislation, this requirement on businesses, is a very blunt tool. We can see there's a pay gap, but there isn't enough granularity to really understand where the problems are coming about.
Like part-time working or
like part-time working, but we need to
workplace.
understand who's being interviewed, who's getting through, who's being promoted. We need much, much more data in order to really see where the problems are. So that's one thing. But I think it's really a decoy because government needs to take responsibility for some of the social infrastructure that needs to be put in place to support businesses in delivering equality.
And to be fair, there was a select committee report this week which talked about changing the culture, talked about the men and paternity rights and how more men need to be able to take them up and feel able to do so.
Exactly.
So you
that's how you
support
really will deliver
what's coming
equality.
Out of Parliament.
Well, actually, that's a Women's Equality Party policy. We've been advocating for a long time that we need to have truly shared parental leave. That means 3 months for dad, 3 months for mum, 3 months that they can decide what to do with at 90% of pay. And that's really important if you're going to equalise the roles of men and women in society. And then childcare. I mean, Maria mentioned childcare as though it was the problem of the employers, but it's not. We have the most expensive childcare in the Western world in this country, and we need to change that. It needs to be properly funded so that everybody can get back into work if they want to.
And Maria, actually, all the recommendations that came from the committee you were a member of and its successor, which published a report this week, the government actually hasn't so far taken up any of those recommendations. So for all the talk of doing something about this, very little action.
Well, I mean, the report that came out this week was looking at the rights of fathers to take, say, 12 weeks of paternity leave. And I think it is about changing the culture, because if men have been offered shared parental leave and time off, and it's not happening, whether that's down to men not wanting to take it, whether it's employers not meeting with the legislation. So until men have a set period of parental leave of their own, and the culture is that parents take time off, and it's not just the women, we won't change the culture in the workplace. So that does need to happen.
We can't change that culture until we adopt, do something about the predominance of low pay, especially in places like Thanet, where workers in Thanet earn £5,000 per annum less than workers elsewhere in South East Kent.
Because some people might be on 0 hours contracts and not have a union representation or any employment.
Yeah, so I think dealing with men's paternity issues is one thing, but I think we need to concentrate on the equal pay issue and concentrate on why we've got a pay gap. And none of this is rocket science. We've been dealing with this in the trade union movement since the 1990s. The whole issue of flexible working, family-friendly working, the whole issue about what we need to do to encourage equality between parents, and also the whole issue about sex discrimination. So actually, people talk about equal pay and they say, well, there's a variety of reasons, but actually if you cut right through all of that, what you find is plain old-fashioned sex discrimination that takes place in the workplace and gets left unchecked. And now we've got this.
I would agree with that, and I think one of the things with this, with these figures coming out, is it's actually masking a multitude of sins. So yes, there's a pay gap. They show there's a pay gap, but they don't really show enough to say, actually, there's no transparency, so people don't really know if they're being paid less than the person sat next to them. There has got to be much more transparency in all workplaces as well.
I would agree
BBC
with
is a
that.
good case in point,
End pay secrecy.
Yeah.
End pay secrecy.
We've got some agreement. Marvellous. Yeah. We're going to move on, because when money is tight, there are certain things you go without. And for some women, that means going without sanitary products when they have their period. New research by the charity Plan International has found that as many as 1 in 3 young women in the South East resort to using alternatives like socks or tissues because they can't afford the proper products. Well, Bryony Williams has been to Dover to meet a small charity trying to tackle what they call period poverty.
In a lifetime, the average woman can spend thousands of pounds on sanitary products. But for those living on the breadline, it's a luxury they often can't afford.
So I had to go onto the streets for 8 months. It was very scary. You just had to use like toilet roll or like rags or something. I normally used to tear up my t-shirt. So it was just, and the amount of clothes you go through as well. And you can't wash, you can't clean your clothes. It's downgrading, to be honest. It's horrible. You're not clean anyway, but then when that happens, you're even not cleaner at all.
Emma now lives in sheltered accommodation in Dover. That's not her real name, as she doesn't want to be identified.
I didn't realise until I was off the street how hard that was and how lucky I am now. I can be a bit cleaner, but it's still really expensive if you add it up. And it's not our choice at the end of the day. We don't choose to have periods because obviously, you know, you get all the condoms and contraceptions and all that free. I feel that sanitary products should be involved in that sense as well because it's not a choice.
Emma is now getting help. She's one of a number of people the Dover Smart Project is supporting to help end what they call period poverty in the town. Dawn Maddison and Laura Graham started the Smart Knickers initiative because they were shocked at how many women are missing work and school because they can't afford sanitary products.
We worked with young carers and we had a discussion with some of them about period poverty and how it affects them and what it means to them, and we discovered that a good few of our girls were missing time away from school because of lack of sanitary protection that was available to them for a variety of reasons. So we decided on a small scale to acquire some tampons and sanitary towels and make them available for our girls. We then realised if the 18 girls that we meet on a regular basis were having this issue, there would be other girls within the Dover district that were having this issue as well.
They are beginning to distribute free tampons and pads throughout the town to raise awareness that this is not just an issue that affects women in developing countries, but in Dover too. I joined them to deliver their first Smart Knicker box.
Very excited! Really looking forward to it. I hope they like it. Yeah. Put a lot of effort into these. They're gorgeous.
Just highlighting how big a problem it is, you know, especially in a place like Dover where we have got areas of deprivation, you know, and it is people that we work with every day that just need this little bit of extra support, you know, and everybody can play their part.
Well, new figures given to me by the charity Plan International show that across the wider South East, over a third of young women have been forced to use newspapers or socks as sanitary products. And 1 in 5 have had to use cheaper and less suitable items because of money worries. Plan International is just one of a growing number of organisations that's calling on the government to provide free sanitary products for women on low incomes.
Hi Anna. Hi. Nice to meet you.
I think there's a lot of stigma and embarrassment around it, especially if you can't afford the items you need. Obviously that forces you then to miss your college, miss your lessons, stay at home, and it shouldn't be something that sort of people are missing their education.
As well as schools and colleges, the Smart Knicker boxes will be placed in cafes, doctors' surgeries and community centres.
This is not a sanitary product.
This is not a sanitary product.
This is not a sanitary product.
It's a hidden problem. There's a lot of social issues in towns that have poverty as an issue. This is just one of many issues that happen to women and young girls as a result of poverty. It shouldn't be happening, but we can address it on a small scale, and it only affects women, and in that way it is discriminating against women. And in our society, we should not be discriminated against anybody.
I'll start with you, Maria Caulfield. I mean, the government's been pretty quiet on this issue so far, unlike Labour and the SNP in Scotland. Is it time to publicly fund sanitary products for some or all women?
Well, I don't think the government has been quiet on this issue. I mean, ideally what we'd like to be in a position is to remove the VAT on sanitary products, and we're just not able to do that as a UK Parliament at the moment because that power lies with Brussels. So when we leave the EU, that's one of the first things that's quite high on the agenda, to remove that VAT, which will help all women.
They'll still be beyond the reach of
no,
many
absolutely.
on the lowest income.
But what the government has done is the current money that's been raised through that VAT, they've ring-fenced that, and for things like period poverty, groups can apply for the funding that's available. So there's £15 million available for 2018-2019, and period poverty is one of those. If people want to, if charities or organisations want to bid for that money and get some of that money so they can make sanitary products freely available, go on the government.uk website, and that money is available for groups and organisations.
But again, Labour has promised £10 million to end period poverty in schools where young girls and women are missing days of education, sometimes several days a month, as we just heard in Bryony's report, because they're too embarrassed to go to school without the right protection.
Yeah, and so the fund that's been made available from the VAT that's currently been raised for sanitary products, schools can apply for that and pay for those sanitary products through that fund, so it's not costing the schools anything. So there are means of doing that.
But you're not offering government money in the same way that Labour are saying
no,
that they
we're not.
would?
No, so what we have said that our aim is to reduce the VAT on the products once we leave the EU, but also that the money that's being raised through that at the moment, groups, organisations, charities, schools can apply for that funding so that those products are freely available.
You'd welcome that, Karen,
I
wouldn't
would,
you?
but I'm frankly outraged to watch that clip, to see what's happening in Dover. I know that's happening in Thanet. You've got a situation here where women are basically too poor to afford sanitary products. That is absolutely completely wrong, and I think we're approaching this from the wrong angle. I think we've got severe poverty, we've got these austerity measures in place, and that's why people and families haven't got enough to afford
this week
these.
show that 1 million people less have come out of absolute poverty since 2010, and actually, when you look at the introduction of the national living wage, when you look at how 4 million people have been taken out of paying the lowest pay, but taken out of paying taxation, actually we're really targeting help to the lowest paid in this country. But
we've still got, in my ward in Newington, I've still got 47% of children living under the breadline, and those children are up to the age of 18, so that's a lot of young women actually that need access to proper sanitary products. Nobody would deny them that. I think it's so dispiriting that we have to provide this through charity, through special, through a special system. Every woman should be able to naturally afford to buy whatever it is she chooses to do with her
the
period.
government, I mean, you've put aside 10 million, and I'm not sure, it's not clear how far that would go. Should everybody be entitled to free products? Is that what the government should pay for? Because it could get expensive.
It could get expensive. I think fix the problem the other end. Make sure that people have got enough money in their purse in order to buy these in the first
With the
place.
best will in the world. We've just been talking about the equal pay gap. That's not going to happen quickly enough for a girl sitting in a classroom who's too embarrassed to ask for help.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they're doing in Dover, I admire what those women are doing. I think that's a really good initiative. I think if we've got this problem, then let's get these sanitary products into schools and youth clubs. But can we do it without delay? Can we do it without creating a bar that head teachers have to apply and get those in?
That funding's available now. So, as I said, if people go onto the DCMS government.uk website, they can apply for that money now.
Celine, one issue is how this works in practice, because for many, particularly younger women and girls, it's embarrassing to have to ask if you're in school.
Yes, there's a massive stigma around having a period at all. But I really must pick Maria up on her funding this sort of thing through charities. It's ridiculous. Women are buying the sanitary towels, they're paying the 5% VAT, and then they've got to fund their own charities to provide them with sanitary towels. I mean, that's obscenely circular. I agree, we need to deal with female poverty first, and actually when we talk about welfare cuts and 86 pence in every pound coming out of the purse of women, then that's really where the problem is. If you stop poverty, you stop period poverty. But yes, there's a stigma, and of course no young woman should ever be missing her education because she's too ashamed to admit she can't afford period products.
And what a pressure on the mother as well. When the mothers are in that situation with teenage daughters, you want to do your best for them, but imagine how you would feel if you couldn't provide those basic things. So I think it's a shame if we're going to get to the point where we're going to have to deliver sanitary products through food banks.
Yeah, well,
that just seems crazy.
Yes. I've been to my local food bank here, and one of the most important things they're asking for is sanitary products.
And that's crazy.
It's in a very affluent town. People think,
and that's the project that's been operating in Scotland with the support of Labour. Members of Parliament and the SNP, but they're offering the products to women via the food banks. What should be done differently then?
We shouldn't have women who are so poor that they can't afford to buy their own sanitary products.
As I said to Karen, the best will in the world.
In the short term,
waiting for your wages to rise doesn't solve the immediate problem.
We would absolutely support giving young women access to sanitary products in schools, for example. That's right, and of course the 5% on VAT at the moment, I mean, that's just got to go.
But things like the introduction of the housing benefit cap have meant women are much, much poorer than they have been before. That's been happening since November. And the introduction of universal credit means that families with more than 3 or 4 children, those children aren't counted when they move on to that benefit. So actually we've got, on the one hand, we've got a solution through charities to fix the problem, and I appreciate what you're saying, there's some money available, but on the other hand, we've got a government that are driving families into deeper poverty, and it's the children in those families that suffer.
A quick final response from you, Maria, to what you've just heard.
Well, you know, it is a serious problem, and you know, as soon as the government has the power to be able to remove that VAT on sanitary products, that will help a lot of women. It won't help necessarily the poorest of women. That'll still be out of their reach. But there is funding available, and I would urge, you know, schools can apply for it, and I think it should be done in a way that doesn't target the poorest, so it's not obvious that they're having to ask for these products.
The thing,
making them, you know, that's why the money's available, so that a broad range of organisations can offer these products to the girls that need them.
Now, when Janet Fuchs was elected as the MP for Merton Morden back in 1970, she appeared alongside Robin Day and Cliff Mitchell-Moore on TV talking about her victory. Almost 50 years on, that interview has gone viral because of the questions they asked about her love life and her gorgeous red hair. Now, Baroness Fuchs lives in St Leonard's, and this week she told us what she thinks looking back at that interview.
And another new MP, Miss Janet Fuchs, who is a new Conservative lady MP. May I talk to Mrs Fuchs first, who've been waiting rather a long time. Mrs Fuchs, Miss Fuchs, I'm so sorry, and Miss Fuchs tells me that she's Miss Fuchs because no man has ever plucked up the courage to ask. Well, that's a challenge to any bachelors in the House of Commons, and perhaps one in particular, who knows? Miss Fuchs, what do you hope to speak on in the House of Commons? What sort of thing are you going to develop?
I say I'm particularly interested in the role of women in modern Britain and the law as it affects them adversely. And those are some of the points I should like to bring up in the House.
I think we ought to say that Miss Fuchs, incidentally, is the most gorgeous red hair. If you're seeing it in black and white, it is something you are missing.
An awful lot of people had black and white TV sets, so he was trying to inform them. I can't get too fussed. I mean, the main thing was I was there, I was an MP. And that's what mattered to me.
She's remarkably good-natured about it. Is there any need for the Women's Equality Party these days? We've come a long way, haven't we, when you look back at the 1970s, Celine?
We've got a long way still to go. I think everyone's admitted that around the table today. We're still not at parity in Parliament. You know, women only represented at about 33%.
And as a Member of Parliament, Maria, anyone complimented you on your gorgeous hair?
Well, I don't know if they've complimented. They might have commented on my hair, but not necessarily a compliment. But I think we have come a long way, and there is a lot to do. But we should celebrate how far we have come. I mean, look at the panel today. We're an all-female panel here with a female presenter. That wouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
that wouldn't have
noticed. That's good.
Karen,
great to be on this panel. All women, fantastic. But this sort of stuff has gone underground. The trolls now comment on women in politics online all the time.
Thanks to all my female guests this week, Maria Caulfield, Karen Constantine and CELINE Thomas. We're off air now for a few weeks for the Easter recess. We'll be back after that with all the news and politics in the South East.